Sandra Bullock was left speechless when Keanu Reeves suddenly confessed he wanted to marry her, turning their comfortable friendship upside down. In one unforgettable moment, a simple conversation turned into a life-changing proposal that neither of them had ever truly expected. Sandra always laughed when interviewers asked about her love life, as if romance were a script she hadn't agreed to read yet. She never imagined that the quiet man who sat beside her on so many movie sets, sharing snacks and secrets between takes, would one day look her in the eyes and say the one sentence that could rearrange her entire world. The afternoon it all began, Hollywood looked deceptively calm. The sky over Los Angeles was that pale, washed-out blue that makes everything feel like a movie set. Sandra had just wrapped a long day of shooting a high-energy action comedy, explosions, stunts, fake bruises carefully painted on her skin. Yet inside she felt strangely empty. Fame was loud, but her apartment at night was always too quiet. She learned to live with that silence, to fill it with work, jokes, and late-night talk show appearances, never admitting how heavy it sometimes felt. Keanu had texted earlier, his message as simple as he was. "Coffee. Need to talk." "No, I'm not dying." She smiled at the last line. He knew her worries too well. For years, they had drifted in and out of each other's worlds, co-stars, then close friends, then something more complicated that neither wanted to name. They shared the same language of shy glances, unspoken apologies, and quietly showing up when things got hard. When her mother passed, he had been the one standing in the back of the funeral, not saying much, just there. When he lost someone he loved, she'd brought him homemade soup at 2 a.m., sitting on the floor beside him while the city slept. She met him at a small, nearly empty café tucked behind an old theater, a place they used as a private hideout from the cameras. He was already there, leaning over a notebook, his hair a little longer, his eyes a little more tired than the last time she'd seen him. Still, when he looked up, that same gentle half-smile appeared, the one that always made her feel like the chaos of her life was suddenly manageable. "You look exhausted," he said, standing to hug her, squeezing just a second longer than usual. "You look like you haven't slept since 1999, she fired back, and they both laughed. For a moment, it was easy, familiar. Two friends sharing bad jokes and burnt coffee, hiding from a world that constantly demanded more of them than they felt they had to give. But something was different. Sandra noticed the way his hands fidgeted with the edge of his notebook, how his eyes kept moving to the window as if he was afraid of being overheard, even though the only other customer was an elderly man dozing over a newspaper. Keanu wasn't nervous often. He saved his fear for his stunts and his motorcycles. This was something else, something she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. "You okay?" she asked, softening her tone, leaning forward. "You said you needed to talk. That usually means something broke, someone died, or you bought another motorcycle." He exhaled, almost laughing but not quite. "No one died, and the motorcycle thing is debatable." "Keanu," her voice dropped, more serious now, "you're scaring me." He looked at her then, really looked like he was memorizing every line of her face. The wrinkles near her eyes from years of laughing. The small scar near her eyebrow from a childhood fall she once told him about. The tiny tremor in her fingers when she was anxious, one she always tried to hide. She felt suddenly exposed under his gaze, as if all the armor she wore, the sarcasm, the boldness, the carefully controlled image, had slipped away. "I've been thinking," he began slowly, choosing each word as if it might explode between them, "about the life we pretend we don't want." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" "You know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one with less red carpets and more grocery lists. Less interviews, more late-night kitchen talks. The life where you don't have to be Sandra Bullock, America's sweetheart, and I don't have to be the guy everyone projects their loneliness onto." His words pierced something deep inside her, because she had imagined that life too in the quiet parts of her mind she never shared with anyone. A little house with a messy kitchen, a dog running through the yard, laughter that didn't need an audience, a love that wasn't a headline. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yeah," she said a little too quickly. "I think about it sometimes, doesn't everyone?" He nodded, and for a long moment, silence sat between them, thick and fragile. Outside, a car alarm wailed and then cut off, like even the city knew to hold its breath. "Sandra," he said finally, her name hanging in the air like a promise and a warning all at once. "What if I told you I don't just think about that life in general, I think about it with you?" Her chest tightened. Part of her had always known. The late-night calls, the 2 long hugs, the way her heart raced whenever his name lit up her phone, none of it had been purely platonic, no matter how many times she'd told herself it was safer that way. Safer not to risk the one friendship that had never asked her to be anyone but herself. "You don't mean that?" she managed, though her voice shook. We're good like this. Friends. You know what happens when actors try to turn their lives into a romantic script. It ends up on the front page when it falls apart." Keanu's jaw clenched, but his eyes were kind. "I know what I mean," he said, steady now. "I've watched you give your heart to roles and to people who didn't know how to hold it. I've watched you pretend you're fine when you're breaking, and I'm tired of standing on the sidelines pretending I don't care deeper than this." She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Her mind flooded with conflicting images, their shared laughter on set, the tabloids twisting their friendship into rumors, the pain of losing him if they tried this and failed. Fear and hope collided inside her, fighting for space. He reached for something under the table, and when his hand came back up, there was a small velvet box in it. Not flashy, simple, almost old-fashioned. Her heart stuttered. "This isn't a stunt," he said quickly, noticing her wide eyes. "It's not a publicity move. I didn't tell anyone I was doing this. Not my team, not your team. It's just me asking you something I probably should have asked a long time ago." Sandra's throat went dry. The sound of the espresso machine in the background faded. The world narrowed to that box in his hand and the unshakable sincerity in his eyes. He opened it, and the ring inside caught the light just enough to sparkle, but not enough to look like a cliché. It was elegant, thoughtful, perfectly her. She pressed her palms to the table to steady herself, wondering if this was some elaborate joke, a scene they were rehearsing without realizing it. But there were no cameras, no director, no script. "Sandra," Keanu said quietly, each word edged with fear and hope, "I want to marry you." Her breath left her body in a sharp, involuntary gasp. For a heartbeat, she genuinely didn't know if she was going to laugh, cry, or run. All the things she had carefully locked away, her longing for something real, her fear of love, her exhaustion with pretending she was complete on her own, rushed to the surface at once, threatening to drown her. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, and the old man's newspaper rustled as he shifted in his seat. Inside the café, in that tiny, fragile universe of 2, time bent around them. Sandra stared at the ring, then at the man holding it, and felt the ground of her carefully controlled life start to crack. Her lips parted, her eyes shining with a storm of emotions she couldn't yet name, as one impossible question echoed in her mind. If she said yes, would she finally find the home she'd been searching for her whole life, or lose the only safe place she'd ever known? And before she could form a single word, the cafe door burst open, a shaking young assistant from the studio stumbling inside, breathless, clutching a phone with a breaking news alert that would change everything, forcing Sandra to choose between the love she'd never allowed herself to claim and a crisis that threatened to destroy both of their careers in a single brutal night. The choice no one prepared her for. The young assistant's entrance shattered the fragile bubble between them. She was pale, out of breath, and clearly terrified to be interrupting, but too panicked to stop herself. Her eyes darted from Sandra to Keanu, then to the open ring box on the table. For a split second, the 3 of them just stared at each other like they were frozen in a photograph. I'm so sorry," the assistant stammered. "Ms. Bullock, they told me you were here. It's urgent. You both need to see this." Sandra's instincts kicked in. Years in Hollywood had trained her to spot trouble before it fully arrived. She closed the ring box with a shaky hand, her heart still pounding from Keanu's words, and forced her voice to sound calm. "What happened?" she asked. "Is it the studio, the movie, someone hurt?" The assistant handed her the phone with trembling fingers. On the screen was a breaking news alert from a major entertainment site. Sandra's photo was plastered across the top, red carpet shot, bright smile, expensive gown. Next to it, a grainy image of her hugging a crew member from set a week ago at night, outside her trailer. It had been an innocent hug, a moment of comfort for a friend going through a divorce. But the headline twisted it into a story it was never meant to be. Exclusive. Sandra Bullock accused of sabotaging co-star with secret affair. Insider claims unprofessional behavior on set. Sandra felt her stomach twist. "What is this?" she whispered. The assistant swallowed hard. "It's spreading everywhere. Hashtags, reaction videos, think pieces. They're saying you crossed boundaries with a married crew member, that you yelled at his wife on set, that you threatened to get him fired if he didn't give you more time alone. The studio's panicking. They're talking about shutting down the shoot until this dies down or until, she hesitated. Until what? Keanu asked, his voice calm but sharp. Until they can replace you, the assistant finished, her voice cracking with the weight of the word. Sandra's chest constricted. She knew how quickly reputations could be rewritten in this town. Years of kindness, professionalism, and quietly supporting others could be burned away in a single false narrative. She'd seen it happen to people she respected. But she'd always told herself she would be strong if it happened to her. In this moment, she didn't feel strong. She felt attacked, exposed, betrayed. This is insane, she said, thrusting the phone back as if it were burning her. They know me, the crew knows me, the studio knows me, I would never. Keanu stepped in, his hand landing gently on her shoulder, grounding her. Who started it? He asked the assistant. There's an anonymous crew insider quoted, the assistant said. Somebody's selling a story. They're saying you've become difficult, obsessed with control, that you scream at people behind closed doors. She winced, as if sharing the words hurt. Sandra's lips trembled. She had raised her voice exactly once that week, when a stunt had gone wrong and a background actor had gotten burned. She demanded better safety standards. She insisted the day stop until everyone was sure the set was secure. Now that moment of protection had been twisted into a weapon. Keanu's hand slid from her shoulder to her back, rubbing slow circles. Sandra, he murmured, look at me. She forced her eyes up to his. His gaze was steady, unflinching, full of a quiet loyalty that made her throat ache. This is a hit job, he said. Someone's scared. Someone knows you don't play games when it comes to people being treated right. You've made powerful friends and powerful enemies. The assistant shifted awkwardly. The studio's publicist is asking for a statement. They want you to apologize, even if it's vague. They say it'll calm things down. Apologize for what? Sandra snapped, her pain sharpening into anger. For hugging a friend, for not letting someone get set on fire. The assistant didn't answer. She didn't have to. Sandra already knew how this town worked, perception over truth, profit over integrity. Her entire body buzzed with adrenaline as the weight of the last few minutes pressed down on her. A fake scandal threatening her career. A real man she cared about asking her to marry him. Two different futures colliding at once. I need a second, she said, pulling away from the table, from the phone, from the open box. She stood up too fast and nearly knocked her chair over. Her heart hammered in her chest like she'd just finished one of her action scenes, only there was no director to yell, cut. Keanu stood too, but he didn't try to control her. He stayed close, simply existing as a solid presence in a moment when everything else felt like it was slipping from her grasp. She walked a few steps away, staring at the faded movie posters on the café wall. Heroes frozen mid-explosion, lovers captured mid-kiss, stories where the good guys were clearly labeled and the villains were always caught in the end. Real life wasn't that clean. In that suspended moment, she realized how much of her identity had fused with her career. The sets, the scripts, the premieres, they had become her armor. Now that armor was being publicly attacked, and beneath it she felt strangely naked. Who was she without all of that? Who was she to Keanu if the world decided to turn on her? Her mind raced through the options. Issue a fake apology and protect the film but betray her own truth. Stay silent and risk being painted as guilty. Fight back and risk being labeled difficult forever. And hovering beneath it all like a quiet drumbeat was the question she'd been about to answer. Was she brave enough to say yes to a man who wanted to build a life with her when her own life felt like it was being ripped apart? She turned back to him, her eyes wet but fierce. You picked a hell of a day to do this, she said with a broken laugh. Keanu didn't smile. He looked at her like every piece of her anger, fear, strength, doubt was something sacred. Maybe this is exactly the day I was supposed to do it, he replied. Because this, all of this, is what it would look like. A life together that isn't clean or easy but real. So ask yourself, Sandra, who do you want standing beside you when the world gets ugly? Their eyes locked, the assistant hovering anxiously nearby, the phone buzzing with new notifications. Sandra felt the weight of 1,000 invisible eyes, the industry, the fans, the haters pressing in on her. And then the assistant's phone lit up again with a new message from the studio, the preview line visible to all of them. If Keanu comments or sides with her publicly, we'll have to reconsider both their contracts. Sandra's breath caught. Suddenly, the choice wasn't just about protecting herself, it was about protecting him too. She stared at that single sentence, her heart pounding as a terrible realization dawned. Accepting his proposal might not just cost her career, it might drag him down with her. Before she could speak, Keanu reached for the phone, reading the message fully, his jaw tightening. When he looked back at her, there was a storm in his eyes, and a decision she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. Courage in the line of fire. Keanu read the message twice, his thumb hovering over the screen as if he wanted to crush the words themselves. Something hard and unshakable settled into his posture, the same quiet resolve he carried into every dangerous stunt, every impossible scene. But this time, there were no cables, no pads, no rehearsals, just two human beings staring down the barrel of other people's fear and greed. "They think they can own us," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. Even the barista behind the counter slowed his movements, as if he sensed something important was unfolding. Sandra felt a tremor of panic. "Keanu, don't," she said quickly. "If you go against the studio." "What?" he cut in gently, looking up at her. "They'll fire me, they'll blacklist me. You think I haven't made peace with that possibility before? I do my own stunts for a reason, remember. I made a deal with myself a long time ago. No movie, no paycheck, no franchise is worth my soul." She swallowed, her throat tight. "This isn't just about your soul, it's about us. Whatever this is, I don't want you sacrificing your career because you're trying to rescue me from a mess I didn't even make." "That's exactly why I won't stay quiet," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Because you didn't make this mess. You tried to protect people, you did the right thing, and this town is counting on you to be too scared to fight back. That's how they keep control." The assistant shifted, clearly torn between her loyalty to her bosses and her instinctive belief in what she was hearing. "They said if you both lie low for a bit, it'll blow over," she offered weakly. "Delete some posts, stop doing interviews, don't respond. Let the internet move on to the next scandal." Sandra laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right, go silent and look guilty, perfect plan." The assistant opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, shame flickering across her face. She'd grown up idolizing people like Sandra, dreaming of working in film, believing in the magic of storytelling. Now here she was, delivering veiled threats for men in suits who never stepped foot on set. Keanu stepped closer to Sandra, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You always tell people to stand up for themselves," he said. "On every set, every interview, you fight for fairness, for kindness, for the underdog. Are you really going to stop believing that just because it's you this time?" His words hit her like a punch. He was right, and that made it hurt more. She had built her life on certain principles: kindness over cruelty, truth over convenience, courage over comfort. But principles were easy to preach and harder to live when the cost became personal. "I'm tired," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I'm tired of always being strong, always fixing things, always being the good one, so everyone else feels better about themselves. Sometimes I just want peace, quiet. A simple life where people see me as a human being, not a symbol or a target." He studied her, his expression softening. "You deserve that," he said. "More than anyone, but you don't get peace by surrendering to lies. You get it by walking through the fire and coming out on the other side knowing you didn't abandon yourself." She looked down at the closed ring box on the table between them, a small, heavy symbol of everything she'd secretly wanted and everything she was afraid of losing. "You're asking me to fight a war," she said quietly, "and marry you on the same day." He smiled sadly. "I'm asking you to let me fight it with you, and yeah, I'm still asking you to marry me, but not so I can save you, so we can stand side by side when things get ugly. I don't want to be your escape, I want to be your ally." The assistant cleared her throat nervously. "They're expecting a response within the hour," she said. "From both of you. The studio's arranging a joint statement painting you as complicated but misunderstood. They'll spin it as stress, long hours, miscommunication. If you read what they wrote, it kind of sounds like they're forgiving you for something you didn't do." Sandra felt a cold rage rise in her chest. "So I get to keep my job," she said, "as long as I agree to permanently stain my own name." "Nobody will remember the details," the assistant said softly. "They'll just remember that something happened." Sandra turned to Keanu, her eyes searching his. "If you stand with me, they might not remember what happened to you either, just that you backed the difficult woman." He held her gaze. "Then let them remember that," he said. "I'd rather be remembered for standing by someone I believe in than for staying silent to protect a brand." He picked up the ring box and slipped it into his pocket, not as a retreat, but as a promise. Then he did something that sent a bolt of electricity through the air. He reached for the assistant's phone, opened the camera, and set it to video. "What are you doing?" Sandra asked, startled. "Taking control of the story," he said simply. He held the phone up, framing both of their faces in the shot, tired, bare, completely unpolished. The assistant panicked. "You can't just, there's a protocol, the PR team." "The PR team had their chance," Keanu replied calmly. "This is ours." He looked straight into the lens, his eyes steady and clear. "Hi," he said. "We're not going to read a prepared statement. We're not going to apologize for something that didn't happen. We're here as ourselves." He nodded at Sandra, offering her the choice with his gaze. She hesitated, feeling her pulse in her ears, then took a breath so deep it hurt. "People are saying things about me that aren't true," she began, her voice trembling slightly but growing steadier with each word. "They're saying I abused my power, that I hurt people, that I used someone who trusted me. I know how that sounds. I know what those headlines do to real survivors, to real stories of abuse. So let me be very clear, I will never use my position to harm anyone. I will always use it to protect them, even when it's inconvenient." She felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. "If that makes me difficult in the eyes of people who put profits over people's safety, then I accept that label. I won't accept the lie." Keanu came closer, his shoulder brushing hers, a silent show of support. "If believing her and standing beside her costs me jobs," he added, "then those jobs weren't worth doing." The assistant watched, eyes wide, as the recording continued. This wasn't a polished PR move. It was messy, raw, human, too real for comfort, which Sandra realized might be exactly why people needed to see it. She ended the video with a simple line, one that came from somewhere deeper than her fear. "You don't have to love me, you don't even have to like me, but I hope you'll listen and remember that famous doesn't mean flawless and anonymous doesn't mean honest." Keanu hit stop. For a moment no one moved. The world outside went on, cars passing, a dog barking, life ignoring the quiet revolution that had just taken place in a tiny cafe. "Once this is out there," Sandra said slowly, "there's no going back." He nodded. "I know." "And you're still willing to tie your life to mine? With all of this?" she asked, gesturing at the phone, the headlines, the storm gathering on the horizon. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took out the ring box again, but this time he didn't kneel. He simply opened it between them like an invitation, not a command. "I'm not asking you to marry the scandal," he said softly. "I'm asking you to marry the truth of who you are, the woman who fights for people, the woman who's scared right now and still choosing to stand. That's the life I want. That's the woman I love." Her heart pounded in her ears. Her career, their reputations, the future, they all swirled around her in a dizzying storm. She could feel the assistant's eyes on her, the weight of expectation, the echo of every fan who had ever told her she made them feel less alone. She knew one thing with painful clarity: whatever she chose next would define the rest of her life. Just as she opened her mouth to answer, the assistant's phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from the social app. They'd uploaded the video too. The number of views was climbing at a speed that was almost surreal, comments flooding in faster than anyone could read them. And mixed among the chaos, one comment caught Sandra's eye, pinned to the top by the algorithm, written by a woman whose name she didn't recognize. "I was on that set. I saw what really happened. She protected us. I'm done being silent." Sandra's breath caught as more comments began to appear. One after another, people stepping forward, backing her story, risking their own comfort to stand with her. For the first time that day, a flicker of real hope cut through the fear. The cost of being real. Within an hour, the cafe had transformed from a quiet sanctuary into an invisible battlefield. They stayed after closing, the owner, a kind, middle-aged man who'd watched their films with his daughters, locking the door but bringing them fresh coffee and turning a blind eye to the studio's frantic calls. The video had detonated online, not like a scandal exactly, but like a confession that cracked something open in people. Some comments were vicious, accusing her of playing the victim, of acting off-screen. But there was another wave too, quieter at first, then swelling: crew members, stunt women, assistants, background actors, even a few mid-level producers. Many used burner accounts, but their words shared a common thread. "She's the only one who remembered our names. She stopped a scene when my harness didn't feel right. She made sure I got paid overtime when nobody else cared." The assistant read some of them aloud, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't know, she admitted. I mean, I heard you were nice, but I thought a lot of it was just PR spin. Sandra sat back, exhausted, her body buzzing from equal parts adrenaline and caffeine. Everybody thinks that, she said quietly. That kindness is a strategy. That tears are a performance. They forget we were people before we were press kits. Keanu sat beside her, one arm stretched along the back of the booth, not touching her but close enough to be there if she needed him. His phone kept lighting up too, agents, directors, old friends. Some were supportive. Some warned him to distance himself for his own good. He turned the screen face down without reading the latest message. Fear makes people transactional, he said. They start calculating everything, what it'll cost them to care, what they stand to lose. But that's not loyalty, that's just business with Christmas lights on it. Sandra let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her chest for years. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Being the guy everyone calls wholesome, pure, like you're not allowed to mess up because they've decided you're some kind of saint. His laugh was surprising, soft, almost self-conscious. All the time, he admitted. I'm not pure, I've made mistakes, I've failed people, I've shut down when I should have opened up, but I try, and when I screw up, I try again. That's all any of us can do. He looked at her more intensely now. You're allowed to be complicated, Sandra. You're allowed to be angry, to be wrong sometimes, to be selfish sometimes. Being good doesn't mean you're never messy. It just means you don't stop trying to choose what's right when it counts. She absorbed that in silence. The ring box sat on the table between them like a quiet question mark. For the first time, she let herself really imagine the version of her life where she said yes, not as a fantasy, but as a daily reality. Mornings with bed hair and bad breath. Fights over nothing that revealed something. Learning to share not just red carpets, but grocery carts, grief, boredom, family, holidays. Could she do that and still be who she was to the world? Would people accept a version of Sandra Bullock who wasn't always polished, always on, always the strong one holding everything together? The assistant, still scrolling, suddenly sucked in a breath. Oh no, she murmured. Sandra tensed. What now? The studios released their own statement, the assistant said. They're saying they're deeply concerned about the impact of social media on complex workplace dynamics. They're not naming you directly, but they're implying a lot. And they're saying they had no idea you were planning to post the video. Keanu's jaw flexed. Of course they're making it about control, he said. They're scared you bypassed their narrative. It gets worse, the assistant added reluctantly. They've halted production indefinitely while they conduct an internal investigation. No mention of your name, no mention of protecting crew from unsafe conditions, just legal language. The words hit Sandra like a physical blow. Months of work, dozens of people's livelihoods, all suspended because she refused to quietly take the blame for a lie. Guilt surged through her. They'll say it's my fault, she whispered, that everyone's out of work because I made a scene. Keanu turned to face her fully. No, he said firmly. This is on them, on whoever started the rumor, on the people who cared more about control than truth. Don't carry weight that isn't yours. But they'll carry it, she shot back. The makeup artist who just bought her first house, the stunt guy whose kid is in the hospital, they won't blame the invisible executives. They'll blame the face on the poster, my face. He didn't argue, he knew she was right. That was the cruelty of visibility. You became everyone's symbol, for better or worse. The cafe owner walked over then, wiping his hands on a towel. I'm closing up, he said gently. You're welcome to stay in the back if you need more privacy. Sandra nodded in thanks, then surprised herself by asking, Can I ask you something? Not as a fan, as a regular person. He chuckled. Ma'am, I've been a regular person my whole life. Go ahead. If you saw that headline about me, she said, and then you saw the video, which one would you believe? He thought for a long moment. The one that sounded like a human being and not a machine, he said at last. The one where the eyes looked like they'd been crying, not airbrushed. I've lived long enough to know that the truth isn't always shiny. It usually comes out shaking. Her throat closed up. That simple, grounded wisdom settled in her bones. As he walked away, Keanu reached into his jacket and pulled something out, not the ring this time, but a folded, crumpled piece of paper. He smoothed it on the table. It looked like it had been read and reread 100 times. What's that? She asked. A letter, he said quietly. I wrote it a couple of months ago, to you, but I never sent it. I thought it was unfair to put it on you, to ask you to hold my feelings on top of everything else you already carry. She stared at the paper, at the familiar messy handwriting. Can I? He nodded. Her hands shook as she opened it. The words were simple, not poetic, but honest in a way that made her chest ache. He wrote about years of friendship, about the way she laughed when she was genuinely amused versus when she was performing, about the time she'd quietly paid for a crew member's surgery and refused to let anyone know, about how he'd watched her push through heartbreak, humiliation, loneliness, and still show up every day with kindness for the people around her. And then near the end, a line that made her eyes sting. I don't love you because you're strong, Sandra. I love you because even when you're broken, you still reach for other people instead of building a wall. I want a life where we both get to be broken sometimes together. The paper blurred, she blinked, tears spilling over. You waited months, she said hoarsely. Why now? Why today? Because today, he answered, you were about to let them convince you that you're too much trouble to love, and I couldn't watch that happen quietly anymore. Silence settled between them, deep and heavy, but not empty. Outside, the sky darkened, streetlights flickering on one by one. Somewhere in the city, studio executives were planning damage control, lawyers were drafting memos, strangers were debating her worth in comment sections. Inside the café, it was just them. A woman at a crossroads, and a man who had already chosen which side of the line he was willing to stand on. Sandra folded the letter carefully, as if it were something fragile she needed to protect. If I say yes, she said slowly, it won't be a movie ending, Keanu. It's going to be messy. There will be days when I hate you for being calm when I'm falling apart. Days when you hate me for wanting to fight everything and everyone. We'll get tired. We'll want to give up. I know, he said quietly. And right now, she continued, we don't even know if we'll still have careers after this week. I know that too. She looked at him, at the steady patience in his eyes. Then why aren't you scared? His answer was simple. I am scared, he said. I'm terrified, but being with you scares me less than watching you go through this alone. That's the only math that matters to me. Her heart twisted. It was such an ordinary kind of bravery, and somehow that made it extraordinary. Not grand speeches, not dramatic gestures, just a calm choice to stay, even when staying came with a cost. She felt something shift inside her then, not a disappearance of fear, but a rearrangement of it. The part of her that had always prioritized her image, her career, her obligations, loosened its grip. Another part, the one that had always longed for a soft place to land, stepped forward. She picked up the ring box again, weighing it in her palm. The café hummed quietly around them, a small sanctuary in a world spinning too fast. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke, but the words felt loud in her own ears. Before I answer, she said, I need to know one more thing. His eyes softened. Anything. If this all falls apart, if the studios cut us off, if the fans turn, if we end up in some tiny apartment doing indie films for gas money, will you still want this? Not the version of me the world loves. The version who's tired, angry, sometimes bitter, and still trying to figure herself out. He didn't hesitate. That's the only version I'm asking to marry, he said. Her hand tightened around the box, her pulse thundering. And just as she opened it, as the ring caught the dim light of the empty café, the assistant's phone buzzed again, this time with a message that made her gasp out loud. Guys, she said, staring at the screen in disbelief. You need to see this. It's from the man they said you had an affair with. He just went on live, and he's risking everything to tell the truth. Sandra froze, the open ring in her hand, suspended between the life she'd always known and the life she might finally be brave enough to choose. While somewhere out there, another voice joined the fight, ready to either save her or drag them all into a deeper storm.